Depression can be manifested in many different forms. It can be in the form of despondency. It can be in the form of loss of sleep, many different things. Do you know someone who may be going through some aspect of depression? This podcast encourages listeners through the suicidal death of Mary Barlow's mother, just how she is coping with and what she learned from that devastating event. Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who is helping me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Mary Barlow for a second episode. She recounts the time she had reflecting on her mother's suicide due to postpartum depression. And while we're not focusing specifically on postpartum depression, we are focusing on depression and some of the symptoms with the hope we who engage in other people will be aware of various symptoms of depression, such that we will engage with a person and help them over what could be a fateful decision, not necessarily suicide, but at least it could be a fateful decision to do something that is not right and could be done better. But Marty, what are some takeaways we can learn from depression? Maybe you want to focus on postpartum depression, but let's encourage our listeners to get involved.
Right. Mary talked about her mother after having a baby. We have read, even though we're not doctors, but you've read, many women have gone through a time of the hormonal change you have after you have a baby. Some women go through a different feeling. They don't know what it is. Some women don't. If you're going through that, you've had a baby and you're going through that and you feel depressed, speak up. And as Mary said, there are websites that you can go to. You can go on Facebook and put it in there, and there will be people that reach out to you to help you. If you have a friend that you know you can confide in, talk to them. But know there's nothing wrong with you. This is just part of being a woman.
And in addition to that, postpartum depression is normally thought of for women. Men, we're learning, can go through postpartum depression as well in a different manner, but it's still a form of depression. Let's listen and learn together. Mary, it's great to have you back with us for a second episode. For our listeners who may be joining us for the first time with Mary Barlow, Mary had a first episode with us where she discussed her very tragic loss of her mother through suicide. And in hindsight, it seems it could have been a result of postpartum depression. Mary, I think it'd be good for our listeners to discuss what you maybe have learned from the past. And I want to caution our listeners, and I just want to say it's somewhat of a disclaimer. Neither Marty, me, nor Mary Barlow are clinical psychologists, nothing of that nature. We are speaking from life experiences. I'm asking questions because obviously we guys don't experience postpartum depression. But if we can become more aware of depression and some of the symptoms, maybe we can assimilate what we learned from the past and be a positive influence on someone who may not verbalize what they're going through, but symptomatically we can observe. Mary, thank you for joining us again. Good to have you back with us.
It's great to be here, Ron and Marty. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to start off quickly by saying what sort of came to this point of me getting here is that I wrote a book. It's called Home, My Story of House and Personal Restoration. It's a memoir, and it talks about my experience with loss. And as Marty had mentioned, my mother committed suicide when I was 7 years old. And so obviously her suicide, or was not diagnosed to be, the result of postpartum depression. This is something that I discovered when I was older and a mother myself, and just was able to think back on the symptoms she had when I had an opportunity to learn what was involved in postpartum depression.
Thank you, Mary. And my thought is, as our listeners are gaining knowledge from you, thinking back, this is what you may have learned from that. Can we take something positive out of a very negative experience? And then I certainly want to encourage our listeners to purchase your book. And it has to do in part with the home and some of the reflection you went through. But Mary, as you're thinking back to postpartum depression, and it's my understanding you have not personally experienced that, nor has Marty, but are there some symptoms that ladies are maybe more aware of than we guys, but we guys need to be aware of? What are some of the symptoms from your perspective of which we need to be aware? And then my thought is, and again, I'm not medically qualified, but if we observe the symptoms, just establish a very loving, connected relationship with that person, and maybe that'll keep them from making a fateful decision. So, Mary, if I've said anything that's incorrect based on your experience, please do correct us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to answer your question is to read an excerpt from the book, Ron. And so if that's okay with you, I'd like to do that.
Please do.
Okay. I want to just kind of put this into perspective too. Keep in mind that my mother died in 1968, a little bit of a different time than today, and things weren't always managed in terms of how messaging and language wasn't always conveyed with as much empathy for people back then. So later, as an adult, when I looked at my mother's death certificate, it simply said the reason for her death was that she was mentally deranged.
Okay.
And so I take a part of my book and I unpack that. And I also want to preface this by saying that at that time in my life, I had an opportunity to work for a nonprofit organization called Moms Helping Moms. I'm not even sure if it's around anymore. And I'm talking about the time when I was writing the book. It was, through the period of like 2010 to 2017 timeframe. And as part of this organization, we had to go through a course on what postpartum depression is. So that's where I got a lot of information in the beginning to discover it and sort of see the parallel between my mother's life and the symptoms of this disease. So here's the excerpt. I'm writing, and by the way, I'm driving as I'm thinking through all this. As the road lines blurred by, I thought back to my pregnancies and remembered learning about postpartum depression, a mood disorder sometimes developing in women following childbirth. My brother Donnie was 3 when my mother committed suicide. Chances of developing postpartum depression increase if the mother suffers from sleep deprivation. Having 6 children, 3 under 9 years old, and my father's billing to manage, she likely wasn't getting enough rest. We can check that box. Another risk factor is having a child with special needs. Donnie was born with Down syndrome. Check the box. A lack of strong emotional support from a spouse or a partner, family, or friends. Dad was out a lot. Her adult children were moving on with their lives. We were often alone with her at night. Check the box. Patients experiencing postpartum depression often feel intense sadness and anxiety. Check the box. Without treatment, it can lead to suicide. Check the box. That parenthetical mentally or deranged on Mars death certificate catches up with me further down the road. As if anyone reading such a death certificate wouldn't understand from its details that Ma dwelled in a dark place, mentally deranged. It's dismissive. Why bother determining why a loving mother and a devoted wife would go down into her basement, create a noose from an electrical cord, step onto a chair, tie that cord over a wooden beam, place her head into the noose, and step off the chair? It's as if the medical examiner thought to himself, let's just dub her mentally deranged and move on.
Well, that is very descriptive. And what my take of that, Mary, is your mother was stressed out. That's a very simplistic, elementary term, but based on the fact that she had a child that with Down syndrome, and she was not getting a sufficient amount of sleep. I'm not here to say that those who are in that same category are going to be depressed nor be suicidal, but at least it seems to me be aware of what some of these symptoms can lead to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know now there are medicines available that weren't back then, but I think the first step is getting help. And my mother didn't get the help, and the people around her didn't see the signs, even though she had attempted suicide many times, or at least a few times before that. People didn't see the signs. And so even though she had done that, they sort of were a bit dismissive about it, I think. So I think it's important that if you see the signs of people who are depressed, to take them seriously. Because once they make the fatal decision, there's no going back, right?
Yes, very well said, Mary. And I don't know that there's any difference in depression based on its cause. In other words, I don't know that postpartum depression is any different than stress depression and lack of sleep depression. But maybe the symptoms are all the same. But Mary, based on your past and things you've learned, is there something very unique about a postpartum depression as compared to any other type depression?
Yes, there is. Obviously, I understand what you said. Is it just because of its caused, right? After having a baby, that's part of it. But it is, I think each kind of depression is a little bit different. I think what you're looking at with postpartum depression are the signs of postpartum depressions, the factors that are involved that I just kind of read through. And, one of the things with postpartum depression is women, this is supposed to be the most joyous time of a woman's life, right? Just have this wonderful new child in your life, and all of your the other moms who are in the birthing classes with you and that you learn along the way, or the moms that you've known throughout your life have always been joyful about a baby, right? That's what we hear we're supposed to be. But when a woman is experiencing postpartum depression, she's not feeling joyful about her baby. She might not even like that baby, and feeling guilty about that because she's feeling like she should, obviously. Some women are feeling like they want to hurt their babies when they experience postpartum depression. So it is very different than other depressions. It is its unique category.
Mary, I want to ask, I have read, and we are not educated in this area, but I have heard that after you have a baby, there's a hormonal change within you. Have you
Yeah,
Read that.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, Marty, that's a wonderful thing to bring up. Why does postpartum depression occur? It happens, there's a huge hormonal change when a woman has a baby. And I'm not going to speak to that because I'm not a doctor and I don't want to kind of tread into territory where I don't belong. That's part of the factor as to what can cause it. But, we all go through those hormonal changes, and some people develop postpartum depression and some don't. And I think that's the mystery. We don't know that. But the most important thing to remember, if you're it or someone is, that it is not their fault. It's not your fault if you experience postpartum depression. Not your fault at all. The most important thing to think about is to reach out for help. And you might think, well, there's no help, right? You could be a single mom. You could have a partner who travels all the time and or is just not involved in your life, or you may be both working so hard at your jobs and your parents may be, in other states and you just can't get support. Okay. But look in your area for groups. Oftentimes you can find volunteer organizations that are interested in pairing up with moms to help them. And that's where you can find your other support. Also try to join groups, even though you're not going to feel like doing it, just try to get yourself out there to be with other moms, which, by the way, can be hard for a woman experiencing postpartum depression because those other moms are all happy and joyful and talking about all the milestones with their baby, and you're not in that group. So if it makes you obviously worse, that's not going to be good. But sometimes in that sisterhood of motherhood, those connections can help.
Is it useful for maybe a neighbor to just get a little bit closer to you and develop a very meaningful relationship if that person observes some of the symptoms you're speaking of? Or do you have to have some sort of training to be qualified to do this? I hope you understand what I'm asking, Mary.
Yeah, I mean, if you notice, it's always nice if you have someone in your community who's having a bit, going to have a baby to, look in on them, see if there's any way that you can help. It's always nice if you bring a meal over. I mean, those first few days with a kid in the house can be really trying, even if you're in the best of moods, because there's just a lot to adjust to. Even if you already have children, each new child coming in the house is a little bit different. So I would say, yeah, by all means, reaching out and helping is never a bad thing.
Now, right there is very important what you just said, that some people may think that, well, bringing a meal over, or I mean, that's just too small, that's just insignificant. But yet, I think what you're saying is no, anything bringing a meal over, I mean, that can be stressful. Any number of things that can help relieve some of the daily activities can be very helpful. And I guess what I'm leading up to is that don't marginalize anything you're doing that you want to do for this mother. Anything and everything can be very helpful. Again, Mary, from a male perspective, I need to ask you if what I'm saying is even partly accurate.
It is. And I'm a little bit remiss because the first thing I should have said is that if you're a woman and you're feeling depression anytime in your life, but especially we're talking about postpartum depression now, you got to talk to your doctor. You're seeing your doctor anyway, right? For your postpartum care, mention this. And I'm sure they're asking this, they should be asking this question, about your mood and how you're feeling. You might be tempted to say, I'm fine. Don't and you don't need to feel guilty again. It's not your fault. And even if you're feeling like I'm not in love with my child, that's common in women who are experiencing postpartum depression. So again, no guilt. It will come in time, but you're going through something right now, and just you need to definitely speak with your doctor. And I do believe there is, again, I don't like to take medicine myself unless I absolutely need it, but I do think there is an approved medicine for this as well.
All right. We are the holistic approach as well, that if there is a non-medicinal approach to this, we would certainly advocate that. And so, again, as we're thinking about depression, In this case, it's postpartum. I think what you're saying, Mary, is that just do get involved, but be aware of. Doesn't require special training. Just be aware of the things that could happen. And if we observed that during maybe pregnancy, there were some aspects of despondency or whatever term would apply to maybe depression, just be aware that postpartum could heighten those traits. Am I being accurate with that?
I think so, Ron. Yes. Yeah.
And so I want to encourage our listeners to just get involved, be aware of. I use the expression frequently, I would rather apologize than have to eulogize, meaning I'd rather apologize if I thought maybe something was, not quite right, and you tell me, nope, it's, everything is right. I'd rather apologize for a misunderstanding than to dismiss wishing I had gotten involved. That's a lot of where I am.
I agree with you, Ron, 100%. Yeah.
I
think
want to say,
sometimes-
Mary,
Go ahead.
that
Go ahead.
I think the woman that is pregnant, has the baby, and is going through this, I just want them to know there's nothing wrong with them. This is just a part of your human being. And it is okay to speak up to a good friend and just, your feelings, one that you can trust. Someone
Oh,
that
100%.
someone that would be kind of dismiss it, and they would. I would just try and talk to my best friend and
Yeah.
tell them how I'm feeling, and they could be that encouragement to let you know you're okay. It's just
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that women can feel really alone in this, and so sometimes you might not feel like you have a best friend at this point in your life. When you think about, a person who may be, sort of a candidate, if you will, or someone who may go through this, a person of childbearing age, they could be the first person in their friend group to have a baby. And they may feel like this is a time in their life when they're moving away from their friendships because everybody's gone in different directions. Some friends are married, some are not, some are having children, some are not. So you may be feeling very, very alone and alienated. But the good thing about, today is social media. And there are so many wonderful platforms for moms and moms, new moms and moms to be. So to your point, Marty, if they don't have someone they can reach out to that they know in that way, perhaps there's a social media platform, where they can kind of relate to some other people.
right.
I'm going to build on just a little bit of the person who may feel I don't want to express myself because I may feel there's something wrong with me and I don't want to feel a lesser person. Therefore, I'm just going to mask it, hide it, or otherwise not express it. I think I want to encourage the person to reach out and just express yourself to someone who cares. And I think that needs to be a person who represents what we call a psychologically safe space. That person is one who will not belittle you or otherwise try to find fault with you, but rather would appropriately empathize with you. And you feel that you can just express yourself, and maybe over a period of time, some fellowship by having lunch, dinner together, coffee, something like that. Maybe through that longer period of association, that can help bring things about to, I'll use the term, stabilize the inner feelings.
Absolutely, Ron. I agree with that 100%. And I'm going to throw something out there that a lot of us don't think about. We've been talking about women because obviously that was my experience through my mother, but men experience postpartum depression as well. So I think the statistic is 1 in 10 men actually have postpartum depression. Now, obviously, they may not be going through the same hormonal changes as a woman, but it's a major change to a life, right? And the way that everything was before is not the way it's going to be in the future, at least in the beginning. And so again, there are a lot of feelings of guilt because everybody's supposed to be happy about this. So I just want to throw that out there. Their signs of it could be a little different: anger, irritability, maybe more risk-taking behaviors like substance abuse. They may detach from the family, be easily stressed out. They could even have physical symptoms, like headaches and things. Don't, the men out in that way.
Wow. Thank you for mentioning that. I hadn't even thought about men in postpartum, but yes, I believe, have responsibility for the overall financial welfare for her. And
Oh,
wow,
yeah.
could be any number of things that, well, I thought I was prepared for this, but now I'm not so sure I am, or anything such as that.
But I also
Yeah.
think men feel like they've been replaced.
Yeah, I'm sure there's so many feelings, all of those feelings that go along with your wife is not going to be exactly the same to you in the beginning, right? After having a baby, and obviously you're both exhausted, you're probably not getting your sleep, and prior history of depression and things like that can play into this. So again, I'm not a doctor. I don't want to go too heavily down that road, but I think it's just important to bring that up.
I totally agree with you, Marty. I hadn't thought about that. Yes, this new baby, the guy could be thinking, well, you're paying more attention to the baby than you are me. And wow, that can take us into a whole new topic. But Marty, I think that could be very appropriate. Oh my gosh, now you got me thinking about different things. But Mary, I think this is a very important topic, not limiting this to postpartum depression, but depression in general, which can lead to some very fateful decisions. I think if we can encourage our listeners to be aware of and have the temerity, the courage, the desire, the compassion to get involved in a person's life, my hope is through our compassion and empathy, which then manifests itself as becoming more involved in a person's life, maybe we can help a person through any type of irrational decision they may even be thinking about. But we don't have to be particularly certified to do that, in my opinion. But it's more so just having that compassionate outreach that we honestly, from the depth of our heart, want to help people. Mary, I want to thank you on behalf of our listeners, passing on your life experience. I want to encourage our listeners to purchase your book and read through that, and together we can learn.
Well, thank you so much, Ron and Marty. It's been a pleasure to speak with you again.
Great to be with you.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life experiences with you.
The Cooper Culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, Marty, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and disc personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.